City of Stevens Point Housing Task Force meeting, recorded January 19, 2022.
Welcome everyone. I'll call the Housing Task Force meeting to order. Thank you all for coming today. Ryan has informed me we do have quorum. Do you need to take any further roll call, or you got it?
Nope, I'm good.
Got what you needed. Awesome. Today we will, after roll call, the second item is a presentation and subsequent discussion on student housing initiatives from representatives of the UW Stevens Point government. So we've got Brad, Abby, and Will here. Thanks for gonna. I'll turn it over to you, and that is on and loud.
Sounds good. Okay, thank you so much for inviting me here today. I really appreciate that. I'm just here to talk about housing in the community and, specifically mostly rentals, and kind of like what students view, and kind of like what our Student Government Association at Stevens Point is doing to kind of help our students perhaps have more knowledge of how rentals work, and kind of get a better experience overall. So. First things first is I'll introduce myself and the organization that I represent. So I am Will Shader. I am the student body president at UWSP, which means I represent about 7,000 students in the community. I represent also the Student Government Association, which is a 36095 statutory body created by the state legislature and created by the university to represent student voices here to the community, which I'm doing right now, to the state, and also to the university community, to the UW system, et cetera, and kind of represent student interests. We essentially spend our time advocating for student needs, representing students, and also creating initiatives and pushing issues that we see would help the student body. So I collected some feedback, essentially about what students had like good experiences, bad experiences, what they viewed as issues for housing in the community, and also kind of this is experiences that I've gathered over the past 2.5 years now in my time at Stevens Point. So housing in Stevens Point, from what I've been told and from what I've observed, is oftentimes for students it's in convenient locations. There's lots of student housing surrounding the university directly. For example, I live in a house which is like a block from the university right on Prentice, and I know there's lots of student housing around there as well. So there's a problem in some communities where I've talked to my colleagues across the state where their housing is miles away from campus. That creates problems. That's not usually an issue here in Stevens Point. There's lots of stuff close to the community. Based on the national average, also prices of rentals are pretty cheap compared to what they are in other communities across the state or even in the country. So generally pretty affordable. Also, I have never had an issue, at least in my experience, with not enough student housing. So I've never heard of anybody just simply not having a place to stay or being able to find a place to stay. I think that, combined with the residence halls we have on campus and the off-campus stuff, that for students generally, there's plenty of space to go around if you so choose. And then the third, I think the fourth thing, and possibly the biggest, is that Stevens Point is generally a very student-friendly community. Very, downtown is literally right next to campus. The government, the local government, generally people in the city are very amenable to students. Lots of stuff here for students to do, lots of accommodations for us in the university. So that is very nice. Now, this is the bad things I've heard about housing in the community, both from my personal experiences I've collected, surveys we've done, etc. So for students generally, we're making not great salaries, obviously because we don't have degrees yet. So sometimes housing can be expensive. I know personally I spend a little bit less than half of my income on housing, which is doable, but not great when it comes to being able to afford certain things. Quality of units and landlords are highly variable from what I've seen. So I've personally, I live with a landlord, and I also live in a house that's very nice, very responsive to needs. It's a nice place, nice location, upkept, but I've heard other students do not deal with the same situation, with landlords who are not as responsive, with units that are not as nice, even if they're paying the same price as I am. So obviously that's not great if I'm paying a certain price for my unit, and then my friend who lives a block away is paying the same price for a unit which is obviously of worse quality. That's obviously not great. Laundry is a common issue that I hear. Lots of students don't like having to pay for laundry in a place that they often pay for utilities and electricity for as well. They view it as kind of like a weird thing. If I'm paying for the water and the electricity that goes into the laundry machine, why am I also paying quarters to use it? That's an issue I've heard a lot of students complain about. Fourth, I would say, is students often feel disconnected from landlords. So obviously we have our landlords' numbers, emails, et cetera, but sometimes students feels like landlords are just kind of there. They only interact with them when they have problems, which I view as like something that probably could be improved, and that part of the negative perception I would feel is that the fact that you're only ever dealing with your landlord when you have an issue, instead of like dealing with them when there's good things going on, or perhaps dealing with them in a positive manner. So if the only interactions you ever have with this person are negative, that's obviously going to kind of tint your perception of the whole industry. Also, searching for housing for the first time is often confusing and difficult for our students. So right now, currently you have to search for like 4 or 5 different websites for rentals. There's no easy way to like compare, for example, what kind of landlord you might want to rent from, different types of companies, that type of thing, or no way to compare rentals with another super easily except doing a lot of your own research. And especially when you're a 19-year-old, 20-year-old, the first time you're ever renting in your whole life, and you have to figure out all of this on your own. You have to understand what a lease means. You have to understand what exactly those lease terms mean. You have to understand like how to get utilities, how to sign up for public service, how like all of that stuff is just a lot for students, and oftentimes they end up making mistakes or perhaps they feel that they get taken advantage of by people because they don't know these things. And I think with landlords deal with hundreds of students, it often gets lost in translation, so they feel like they're getting taken advantage of. And often when there are issues with their landlords that are unresolvable, that they can't resolve by themselves, they often feel there's no recourse to do that, because landlord controls your housing. If you have an issue, they have all the power in that situation, so it makes it kind of difficult to like address those issues to some higher power. So the last thing that I'm here to talk about today is considering all of these things that we have heard. We were contacted about a year and a half ago, right after I was elected, I think April of, oh no, not a year and a half ago, less than a year ago, about April of last year. We were contacted by this company called College Pads. They are in my personal opinion, a really cool group. They're a startup out of Wisconsin, and they've spread across the entire country now. Their only goal is college housing, so what they'll do is they will create a website that is chartered with the university. This one is UW-Madison's version, because right now Stevens Point does have a partnership with one that we spearheaded, and Abby there helped get set up, but it hasn't gotten off the ground yet because we just started it this year. But what they do is they collect housing for students from all sorts of landlords in the area and collate it on one website that is officially partnered with the university. So for example, our College Pad site will be able to use UWSP logos marketing in the exact same way that they do here with Madison. And this will be the place that we direct students and the place that the university directs students to find housing. It makes it incredibly easy for students to price compare, shop across the community to see like, this one might be farther away, but it's cheaper, versus like this landlord has this rating versus this landlord has this rating, this unit has this rating, this unit has this rating. Makes it much easier for students to shop across the community and compare different units for their own needs. So this is who we've decided to go with in the community, and it hopefully will make it a lot easier for students to find housing and for landlords to connect with students. So that is the hope here. And we're hoping to have this kind of off the ground and ready to go by next fall. So that's long and the short of it. Shorter presentation, but I am more than happy to take questions.
Thank you. Does anyone have any questions off the bat? Elisa?
Sure. Thanks, Will. So out of Madison, were there any issues during the launch, and have there been any issues since that the university either had to manage between College Pads and the students, or the students and landlords or the university somehow?
No, I spoke to my colleagues across the state, and so did Abby, about how their relationship with college pads had been, because they all started by working in partnership with the student governments on each of these campuses, which they all have. And we heard pretty much nothing but positivity from their relationship with college pads. College pads deals directly with the landlords, so any issues that arise there are ones that they handle. And they have a contract now with the university, and that's how they handle it through there. And I have personally not heard of any issues across the state, so.
Where do the ratings come from? You said College Pad has ratings, so students can like compare and contrast.
Yeah, so students give those ratings. So for example, once you move out of a unit, you can go on the website and be like, all right, so there's many different categories. There's like timeliness of responses, value. There's a category for like laundry, kitchen, stuff like that, like every aspect of the housing, and they can rate it out of 5 stars. So over time, you get an increasingly more robust database of like how students rate this renter or how students rate this unit. So in Madison, they've been going for, I think, 8 to 10 years now, so they got quite a bit of data.
Oh, wow.
So it'll take a few years to get off the ground here, but over time, we're hoping that we can kind of use that to price compare.
All the units, like when you guys launch in the fall, will be like 0 or nothing.
Yeah, so
Okay.
at first, the main advantage is that it's just one place where you can find all the college housing in the entire community. So like that would be the appeal of it at first. And over time, as students give feedback on those kind of properties and stuff like that, you'll be able to also use those other metrics to shop around and stuff like that.
If a non-student rents a unit, are they able to leave a rating?
I'm pretty sure you have to have a student account to leave a rating on these websites, to actually log in and use it. That's what we were told, so.
Lisa, go ahead.
How is this funded? Is this the university pays? Is this bought by the university for the use of the students?
It is funded through the landlords, to my
Okay.
experience. So right now, to my understanding at least, landlords pay different websites, multiple different websites, to advertise their listings. The goal is that they would just stop using those and go to here for their college-specific rentals, because there are some in the community which are always occupied by students, which is what this would be used for.
So can I ask what the reasoning was? Because you indicated that one of the biggest problems was that rentals were advertised at too many different spots. This was a consolidation thing. I know that SGA had in the past had already had this covered and taken care of when they partnered with the Apartment Association, which already had a dedicated student site. So you've essentially split it into 2 now. And this is now a pay one where the Apartment Association one wasn't. Do you expect many landlords to buy into that?
So the reason that we didn't is, I guess, twofold. So number one, the Apartment Association is controlled by the renters. So students kind of don't necessarily trust that for its ratings and stuff like that. Second reason is this has an ability for ratings to go there. So this is much more student-centric on this website. They partner with many different, they've partnered with dozens of universities at this point, which is why we made that decision. So it was not just a off-the-cuff random act, essentially. We did our research, asked around. For example, we asked the Oshkosh Student Association, the Associated Students in Madison, the Milwaukee Student Government, et cetera, how their relationships with college pads had went and how their renters had gone. We also asked college pads about that exact same thing. We said, okay, well, the Central Wisconsin Apartment Association already has something similar. So are you worried about that? Is that going to be an issue? They said they've dealt with, that they've worked with these renter associations in the past, and they've always managed to convince them to go to their site. So that's what they said. Yeah, you were involved in those conversations more too.
So I specifically talked to previous people who were in my role, and I work with housing specifically. And essentially what they said was we did have sort of a marketing agreement with the CWAA, and just the nature of that agreement was that it was very hard to like keep each other accountable on both sides. So SGA wasn't super easy to, it wasn't easy for the CWAA to hold SGA accountable, and it wasn't easy for SGA to hold CWAA accountable, just because the nature of the agreement, it wasn't a well-written pseudo contract, and they tried for a couple years to fix it. Now this is all what I've been told because I wasn't around, obviously, but it was an arrangement that they tried to fix and it did not work. And then also just as a student in my journey finding off-campus housing, the Point Off-Campus website is not as user-friendly as it could be. Obviously, that's something that could be improved upon, but
Sure.
in combination with the fact that that marketing agreement wasn't super efficient, it was convenient for us to find a contract that did everything we needed it to without us having to put in the effort.
Do you
Travis,
know?
real quick, just
Yeah.
for clarification, so everybody knows
Yeah.
your role in your property management company.
Yes, yeah. I have a property management company. I also serve on the CWA board, so I was actually part of all those contract stuff before too. And I'm not, totally fine. Not a problem as far as that goes. It was just more curious that when you identified it as a problem, that being multiple websites, that adding another one to the mix, I wasn't sure if that was a solution. What do you typically see if you're looking for landlord buy-in? Because I think that's what you really need. You need a lot of landlords to jump in on this. What does it cost them to do that? Do you guys know offhand what the? Okay, I was just
No,
curious.
because that is
Okay.
the purpose of the contract, is that College Pads says that they will.
They take care of that stuff.
Yeah.
Okay.
So
And again, if this is just me kind of spitballing and talking this stuff, how do you get this out to the landlords then? Like, short of us being in a presentation, how do landlords even know that this exists?
Yeah, so my work getting it off the ground involved gathering a bunch of contact information. So Anchor Apartments, Candlewood, a bunch of like individual landlords. I think MS Properties is also on there. I sent them like a spreadsheet of all of the landlords that I could find doing research on the area. And then they take that spreadsheet and contact the landlords. So that's as much as I know how they contact you. So
And if I may, Madam Chair?
Yes, go ahead.
Okay. It was one of the reasons why, and I'd met with SGA.
Sure.
And I thought this would be a good starting venue, because I know that and
Yep.
so I thought it would be a great starting point to create more awareness and understanding and connections.
Sure.
Attorney Beveridge has his hand up virtually, so call upon him.
Yeah, so obviously when you've got a rating system like this, the integrity of the rating system is essential. Did you talk to the College Pads folks about that at all? Because my first instinct is that if the revenue source is coming from the entities that are being rated, it does invite shenanigans potentially.
Shenanigans. That's
Call it
is that a
shenanigans.
legal term?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's part of the landlord-tenant law.
Yeah, so that's part of the reason that, like, this is, so the way that you get to this website now is that it's officially advertised, like, it's going to be advertised on our new website whenever that gets off the ground, as well as the university's website as, like, the official place to go for college housing. And you, in order to, like, have an account on the website or leave ratings, you have to have a UWSP student account. So you have to be a student to, like, use the website fully. You can always peruse if you're any community member, but you can't, like, leave comments or ratings or anything else without a student ID.
I have another, go ahead, Ryan, you haven't asked a question.
It's more of, more of a question. One of the challenges that the city has is we work with the Apartment Association and student government on having the housing fairs, trying to bridge some of those gaps. One of the challenges that the city has run into is there's always turnover at student government. It's the nature of university student governments. Are there ways that we can ensure that there is more continuity or more consistency with those contacts between student government, the city, and the apartment association? Because that's always been one of our biggest challenges.
Yeah, we've had even internal issues with that over the past, especially the past 2 or 3 years, due to, I think, a combination of the pandemic making things harder. So we're not in. So for a while we weren't in person, which made the transition from 1920 to 2021 very difficult because a lot of our executive staff, for example, just graduated and then poof, gone, and we're MIA for like any sort of information collecting. Abby was luckier because the person who held her position before was here. Others were not. So it made it more difficult. Also, the past few previous presidents have had a habit of graduating and then poof, MIA. So a lot of the knowledge that I hold, or like the way that I can be like, okay, you want to talk to this person, just that information just evaporated for the past couple of years. So we are working on ways to address that by creating much more robust transition materials for our people so that they can like have a guide on how to do things. For example, when Abby creates her transition materials, I will personally go through them to make sure that they're like good, multiple pages, robust. So they will have like deadlines for like, okay, so we have a fall housing fair. This is when you needed to get done by, that type of thing, which hasn't happened the past 2 or 3 years. So we're gonna be much better at that. I know it's been an issue.
A follow-up to that is, I think the quality of student tenants greatly increases if they attend like the housing fair and the educational series. It's been a pretty consistent message from the landlords and the apartment association. Are there ways that the city can help increase the attendance at these types of events? I know previously we had some of the business classes receive credit if they had attended one of the educational series. And what are ways the city and the apartment association can help increase that attendance?
Yeah, so I agree that I did attend the informational session, and I think that's like an invaluable resource. I think that was super helpful for me, and then obviously super helpful for the students who did attend. One of the things that I talked about personally with the representative from College Pads is that there is like tenant training that you can complete on the website. So it will hopefully have the same information that students were receiving at that informational session on the website. And since it is like we're partnered with them, we can make sure that the information that's on the website is specific to Stevens Point. So I think if you're wondering how to get that information on the website, it's my understanding that we can put the College Pads in contact with like the city housing task force, and we can sort of like tailor that information to Stevens Point. As far as making sure the attendance is up, I think any organization has been having that issue because of COVID. The biggest thing is outreach ahead of time, and I think this year we did a pretty okay job. We had almost 20 people show up. So I know that doesn't sound like a lot, but in comparison to other events, that was pretty good turnout. Yeah, I think the credit thing was a good idea. I'm not sure how to entice students because that's incentivizing it, but you can bring horse water, but you can't make it drink.
Free food.
The Politos gift cards. That was a good idea. That was good.
Yeah, so free food is always good. But the second thing is that I personally did not know that had needed to happen because my previous predecessor left me AWOL, so I had to like relearn a lot of things. Her predecessor did not tell her that housing date had to be on that date, so we dropped the ball on that one, and I will apologize for that, but that will not happen again. So
we're not here to like.
No, I get it.
You, like,
I know.
I totally understand. Like,
fully
drop the
admitting,
ball too.
over,
It's
like,
totally
I'm fully admitting that like we have an issue with creating good transitions. So my goal this year, by the time I leave, is to make sure that does not happen anymore. So that'll be part of it, is just making sure that we're on top of it in like September and not like.
I mean,
November.
I'll be here for the next 2 years. So for the next 2 years, I can guarantee you, okay transition.
It's a great campaign.
Longevity. It looks like a member of university staff's got their hand raised. Rachel.
Hi, I'm Rachel. I'm the SGA advisor here at UW Stevens Point, and I just thought I'd offer some insight working with obviously Will and the SGA as a whole. Two different things is that I think Will has a good relationship and is building that with our university marketing and communications office. And as he mentioned, kind of our website rebranding and launching, we can continue to use college pads and implementation and partnerships with that team to market the event, market this platform appropriately on our website front facing. Even the work I do in my office in admissions and recruitment, getting it in the hands of incoming and prospective students. Whether that's the event date, if we know that far enough in advance, we do what we call STAR or orientation programs for transfer students that are looking for housing from the get-go that won't be living on campus, or if it's even first-year students, knowing that I believe Will has kind of alluded to that search for off-campus housing begins right away in their sophomore year. It's really early. And so if we can get it in their hands when they're a first-year student, they might already be thinking about that, only 365 days later. So incorporating into some of those opportunities. I also would encourage, we had talked about event success, being somebody who coordinates events. I think we have to think strategically on whether an event for housing is the best method for implementation. I know we're trying to get in front of these students to educate them. And I think somebody said that there's better tenants that come to these events. Obviously, our School of Business and Education does SPE events, which you were talking about. We can help make those connections for students to receive credit. But is there opportunities to connect with off-campus housing in a virtual platform? We all know that virtual has become our life. Here we are in a virtual meeting now. So can the event be a hybrid model or offer two different event dates for in-person and virtual sessions with breakout rooms?
Yeah, I think one of the biggest things that you guys brought up and the concerns is like a desire for a quality relationship with the landlord, and that's variable. And so I see this platform as something that mirrors a lot of transactions and conversations that people have, like Airbnb and other kind of things like that. So, and really the utility of those platforms is to take away a lot of the guessing and some of the like baseline communication, so that when you are in person, you can have a more quality relationship. So I guess I'm wondering too if there was something that from the city's perspective and like the general landlord perspective, as we like go into relationships with students, that the landlords need education on in order to like, okay, we have students, like, are we hitting these like top 10 things? Just in the same way that like young students learn about like changing the fire alarm and checking the smoke detectors and things like that. So I'm just like, these are basic things that like, imagine that you're 20 again and you're gonna start living in a house, and what are the things I need to take care of? And those things can be, I think, put together in really like digital based communication style that are pretty easy to pick up whenever you're scrolling on your phone anyway, seems like.
May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Does the housing fair, or are there resources? I mean, signing a lease can be a daunting task because there's a lot of legal terms. Is there some sort of resource available to students to walk through those things? Okay, that seems an important component.
Yeah, we employ a lawyer, an attorney, not with our SGA, but we have them on contract essentially for any sort of student issues. So they will also be advertised through this website.
Okay.
Their primary purpose is obviously like legal things with mostly landlords, because that's most of the legal dispute student get into, but also just questions about like showing this lawyer that we pay, hey, here's a lease. Is this a good lease? Or like, how do I read this? What does this term mean? That type of thing. They're very underutilized right now because we have no really good way to advertise them. So this is going to be another place to do that.
Yeah.
So can I ask a question on the rating system that you're using? And just because Polly brought up a good point there, if it's similar to an Airbnb model, does it allow the landlord to rate the student too, since they've got a verified account?
Yeah.
No, I don't think so.
I think that's something we should definitely we should definitely implement though, because like, I mean, you get in an Uber, your Uber driver knows what type of passenger you are. So because it is it is a certified account, I think as we've been standing here, that's a thought that popped into my head. Wow, tenants should be rated by their landlords.
I think one of the biggest problems that we encounter, I would say, I'll give it from the landlord perspective because I haven't rented in quite a while, with the rating systems on anything is that they're always so arbitrary on emotion and less on just facts of, did you pay on time, yes or no? Was there any noise violations, yes or no? That'd be great versus, or the landlord, was the property as advertised? Were the utilities correct? Were maintenance issues responded to timely? All those things. The problem I always run into with rating systems, reviews, that kind of stuff, is when you get off of that and it's like, well, the landlord didn't let me out of my lease because I didn't want to live there, or I had to move out of town, and so 1 star, I don't like him. Well, there's still a contract involved there, so I mean, did they do anything wrong or not? And the same thing would go with students too, that you wouldn't want a landlord also given that opposite end of things going, yeah, they paid their rent on time, but I really didn't care for this guy for some other arbitrary reason. So I think that's an important one with reviews, or.
I think that falls under the shenanigans that Logan
Yeah.
was talking about.
That's the rating system, and we can connect you with the college PAS representative that we work with. The rating system is all very technical things, like exactly what you were saying.
Sure.
So
and that's probably exactly what you'd want. If you're looking for a rating system, that's probably the absolute most beneficial way to do it. So.
And he showed us that when they implemented these websites at these cities, that the student satisfaction with their landlords increased overall, as did the landlord satisfaction with their students. So both ways, because a huge part of this website is an educational resource component for the tenants to know how to be a tenant, and the rating system also makes sure that students can know what they're getting, and they're not going to be super upset if they pay for a cheaper rental and it's not a 5-star condo or whatever. So exact same thing.
One of the things that you said that jumped out at me when you were looking at I think it was under the bad things with renting was students didn't have a relationship with their landlord, I think is what it was, feel disconnected from their landlords. That one kind of surprised me a little bit because I would assume most people wouldn't want their landlords in their business too much. But is that kind of true?
Yeah, it's more that when students think of their landlords, all they ever think of, I have to pay this person on the first, and sometimes they don't respond to me ever. So whenever they have a need to actually contact their landlord, it's almost always a negative reason. So I think that in my personal opinion, that probably brings the perception of
Sure.
of their landlord down, even if it's unwarranted, because they might be a good person, but the only time you ever interact with them is when you have an issue.
Yeah.
So that's just an entire history of negative interactions. So perhaps a way that we could create ways for landlords to interact positively. Not all the time, obviously. You don't want to hey, your landlord knock on your door hey, how you doing? You want to go out to get dinner tonight or anything like that? No, obviously.
There's definitely a line there, yeah.
Yeah. But just a way to perhaps meet your landlord or work with them in a capacity that's not always negative would be helpful, I think.
And I can see it, but I think from the landlord's perspective, we obviously are stuck in we're bound by law, and we obviously have to give, under Wisconsin law, our tenants the right to quiet enjoyment, to not be bothered. They pay rent, they have that property. We're not to really bother them other than certain circumstances. So I think it'd be a fine line to navigate, but it's definitely something that you could look at as far as that goes too. But I think that's kind of where you get maybe some of that disconnect too, is that we're kind of told not to bother them. They pay rent, they have the right to use that property and enjoy it and not be bothered by their landlord. So that might be a tough one to figure out how you bridge that. But I totally get where you're coming from, because I think a lot of times tenants just hear from us when there's a noise complaint, or Mark from the city's yelling at us because somebody's parked on the lawn and we got to go address it and stuff like that. So yeah, I definitely can see that as well too. But I don't know if there's a great way, because some of the stuff you got here, the good is always fine to hear. The bad's always the stuff that I'm more interested in. It's because those are the improvement areas. I almost wish there would be a better way to kind of keep up to date on the bad, or the areas of improvement, I guess we want to call it that way. From students that could somehow convey to, at least from a landlord's perspective, so that we can look at things and go, okay, well, here's areas that we could focus on and things that we can kind of do better as well too. But it's so hard for us to get that information. You know, I'm
One of
pushing
my-
close to 50. I'm not in that student realm anymore.
Yeah, yeah. One of my back burner projects this year is to create a survey and send it out to students about just housing. So we can certainly work together to craft a survey, fill it with questions that you want answered to get good data. Because I have the authority to send out an email to the entire student body. So like I can do that for you, and we could do an annual thing.
And
if you wanted to.
We actually have done that in the past, I think twice now. But I think we partnered with somebody else at the university, maybe marketing department or something like that. And I think at the time we wanted to run the same questions so that we could kind of gauge whether there was changes in those same areas as well too. But it's a great idea, and I think if you guys are up for continuing to do that, I think that'd be super helpful because it like I said, it lets us know focus areas. At the end of the day, as a landlord, we're in this to find good tenants, make sure they enjoy their place, and hopefully they stay for a while. So the more we can do that, the better.
Yeah, we can certainly work together on that this
Yeah.
semester.
I also think it's hard because, like, you're one individual landlord, you're busy running your properties. How do you know what the problems across town are if those aren't your properties?
Right.
So if we're all sharing the same data, that would be helpful.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna throw out there, we've been in contact with a professor of one of the business classes, and he's kind of eager to work with the housing task force to, like with his students as like a semester-long project to gather data and learn how to sort through it and draw conclusions, different things like that. So that might be a really good thing to task them with. It takes it off your hands and they'll just go to town and get it done as a
Okay,
class. So
that's a really good idea.
Yeah.
And if we could turn it into an annual thing, that'd be awesome.
So one of the things the Housing Task Force is charged with is essentially creating this white paper, this recommendation to the City Council on implementation of anything and everything related to housing. And so one of the things I think there's been a lot of really interesting discussion with the student housing component, but is the city missing something? Is there something that we're not doing good enough, or are there areas of improvement, or what are we doing super well with that relationship with the student housing population and like the landlords or the apartment association? Are there areas of improvement that the city council could give directive to city staff to improve upon?
If I could add to that, even if the students, do they even understand that the city wants to help and be a part of that, or even that we exist as an entity to provide support to not only students, but all citizens who live in this community. So I think that is all blended. I don't know if you'll have those answers right now, but I think it's an ongoing conversation.
Yeah, so I think the most important thing that y'all can keep doing is coming to that informational session. The only reason I know who Mark Cordes is because I've met with him because of my job, not because I rent in the city. So I think it would be helpful if, like, that entity of the city was more approachable to students, like if they were more recognizable. I think that would be helpful, because then when they do have issues and they're like, I reached out to my landlord, it didn't work, I don't know what to do, that's what that division of the city is there for. So I think it would be helpful if they were more recognizable to students. And part of that is just, we can put it on the website. That's kind of my answer to everything right now, is we can put it on the website.
Yeah, we also run, like Rachel mentioned earlier, we have STAR orientation. So if you want to, you can send somebody from that office to that STAR day and table, and all these freshman students walking by will see you and know that you exist, which is something they probably don't right now. And we also run twice in the beginning of the year and then once in the beginning of the second semester, we run engagement fairs, and student government or student clubs are not the only people who show up to those engagement fairs. They also have, like, for example, U.S. Bank goes, Domino's goes, and like advertises for employees and stuff like that. And you're more than welcome to reach out to our campus activities and student engagement, and I can help you with that, or Abby can, and get you set up with a table there as well for that night, so that students can like have questions and be like, oh, if I have an issue, this is where I go. Cool, thank you. And like that way, it's more exposure. That's a couple of ideas right off the bat. But I do want to say that in my experience, the city is very student-friendly. So like, it's not, I've heard things from my counterparts across the state, and that is not the case in every city with a university. So I just do want to extend that. I really do appreciate the work that you do already. So I don't, it's very good. So I just wanted to say that.
Yeah, I'll just add, a lot of times when people call the community development department and their students, it is a conflict between typically themselves and their landlord. And more often than not, one of the first questions we ask is, have you talked to your landlord? And sometimes they go, well, no, I haven't. It's like, okay, time out. Go work with your landlord, and if you still run into issues, you can work through us, and we can, and part of it is just knowing what rights the tenants have. I mean, allowing one of the inspectors to enter the property, go through it. We have had more recently some major issues on some of the student housing. I'm not going to say specifically where, but with cockroach infestation. And it was, all we had to do was have a good communication between the tenants and the landlord, but they were so at odds with each other that neither party was willing to compromise or figure out a solution to the problem. So then when the city got involved, we have some ability to find those solutions and work with both parties. And that's one thing that, you either get a letter from Mark Cordes saying you've done something wrong, or you meet with him like when you're going through some of the educational components. And we're always there as a resource, but we do encourage students to talk with their landlords first before contacting city government.
Yeah, which makes sense, because you don't want to escalate it to that level if you don't have to. So.
And we work a lot with the attorney that the students have, and we have a pretty good relationship with them. So.
I would throw one thing out there as maybe a focus area, because I don't have an answer for this yet, but it seems like when it comes to everything housing related, when it comes to students, it's mostly that off-campus aspect we're talking about. It's not necessarily the dorm life. It's the off-campus aspect of it. And the problem is that they've been in school for 2 years. It's like, how do you reach them at the right time to let them know, hey, now's the time to get educated. You're going to be moving off campus in a year. It's trying to catch them at that sophomore year, right at the very beginning of it, because, like you said, that leasing cycle is ahead of it. And I don't know. I don't have an answer for that. It's just one of those things where you're like, how do you let them know exactly when they should be attending these housing fairs and when they should be attending the educational events, and when they should start looking at your website or any other website or whatever you're looking for places. I don't know if there's a great educational way to just tell them, here's how you do off-campus housing.
It sounds like such an important thing for both students and landlords that it might be something that should be mandated. Like before you register for class, you have to talk to your advisor, or you have to pay your bill or something like that. So I know it's difficult for the university to mandate that, and it's difficult for a student, they probably don't want to get involved in that either, but it seems really important.
We could talk to our Residence Hall Association and our housing and student life and see if there's a way to insert that into the orientation they do every August when they get on campus. So even our sophomore, second year students, when they're moving back in, is a first night orientation. So we might be able to.
That'd be huge, to be honest with you, because I think that's the one component that misses, that the school starts up, leasing starts up, the educational events are all there, and are they aware of them just yet? Is it even on their radars?
Yeah, no, probably not, because it seems so far away, but it's really not if you have to sign a lease months in advance. So.
Yeah, I mean, like, I'm a sophomore, and I had my lease signed before I ran the housing informational session. So I think when sophomores move in, there needs to be something like, hey, you need to start thinking about this now. This is what you need to know.
Yeah.
And there's about a week of informational stuff going on every night in the beginning of the school year. So I will speak to our residence halls about working that in there. I think that's probably a good idea.
Even for students that live off campus or like with parents or something like that, it's stuff they'll have to know eventually. So it kind of seems like something that should be a.
And we can advertise it to the whole student body as well. Yeah.
Rachel has a comment online.
The university just implemented this past year a parent portal as well. That's for prospective and current students. I think it's important that if we're relaying this information to students, while it may be a required component, we know that parents are often the driving influence of what they do and why they do it. And so if we can get communication in our parent portal that all, again, parents of current pointers can see, then that can be driving them, hey, you should start to look at housing. Hey, you should go to this fair. And admissions and recruitment, I can give the contact. Chris Brundage coordinates that parent portal. So that would also be a good point of contact.
We're taking notes.
Yeah, I just want to echo, I agree with Lisa's comments. I think that if you're looking for justification when talking to the UW curriculums, that part of the UW system is educating citizens and well-rounded citizens. So learning how to be a part of the community where you reside, which for as long as you're going to Point, you're in Point. So is probably a good enough reason.
Something about, it was like an idea, isn't that? Like
Yeah,
the
that's
Wisconsin
once an idea,
or something?
yeah.
Okay. I want to make sure.
Blended in.
I went to Lawrence, so I didn't get
Oh,
as,
okay.
as indoctrinated with that, sorry.
It's not indoctrination. It's just
I know. Yeah.
I was gonna say it's not indoctrination, it's just a way of life, but
Yeah.
yes, it's just facts. Yeah, I mean, with the portal, you get moms on it, moms will get the job done, so maybe we
That is
should
correct.
put them there.
Okay. Thank you so much.
This
Appreciate
was
it.
Thank you for your
awesome. Thank you
perspective.
so much.
All right.
Any other final comments for these guys?
Go get ready for those 4 tests.
Yeah.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Thanks,
Thank you.
guys.
Thank you.
All right.
Can I have your thumb drive back? I didn't remove it safely, so hopefully it didn't corrupt.
it's literally the one file.
Our last item for tonight is the beginning of information gathering and preliminary goals / objectives. Staff update, and Brian sent along a memo, so maybe you saw that, but.
Yeah, so this morning I did send a memo out just outlining essentially what differences are between goals and objectives, understanding that not everybody's been part of some of these policy formation groups. We're not asking to necessarily discuss everything right now. One thing that community development has done over the last probably 2 years now is with some of our commissions that don't meet regularly or don't have a reason to meet regularly, we try to implement goals and objectives. And one of the best ways that we've done that is we ask outside of the meeting for individual members to provide a goal that you think, from the conversations and from the presentations we've had, 1 or 2 goals that you think would make a lot of sense for us to implement in a policy document, and then how you think we should achieve those goals, so those objectives. Send those to city staff, and then city staff looks for common themes. And then we take, we might have 3 or 4 common themes in this first go around, and we'll bring it back. And we're going to start essentially formatting the goals and objectives to really create a well-rounded document, instead of city staff saying, well, this is a goal that I think we should have, and here are the ways that we're going to achieve it. We're not oblivious. We got to have long-term buy-in by this group for the policy document itself. So putting on, when I was a student at UWSP and going through the teaching program, I'm assigning you folks homework. So I would appreciate it if before our next meeting you email Lisa and I some goals and objectives, or how we're going to achieve those goals, so we can start finding the common themes and putting those together in an actual document. And we'll bring those back for further discussion. But what you're going to see now is this body transitioning from presentation, information gathering, to actual policy development and recommendations. So more than happy to answer any questions. Otherwise,
So I was going to say, you want goals, but not necessarily the tactics on how to achieve them. Because we may not have all of the tactics
Answers for that.
necessary to achieve the goals, just the ideas on those goals. Is that kind of explained?
yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, yep. If you think you've got this great idea that is going to help us achieve that, please, the more information we get out, the better off we're going to be. But yeah, mainly just get us goals for the time being. Good point.
Will there be more presentations at all? Okay.
Yep.
I guess,
You'll also be getting an email from me later on today with the speaker outline, like who we have scheduled for the next like 3 or 4 months.
Oh, good.
And then asking you guys, who do we still need to hear from?
Okay.
So
I was more curious on, I know we've had some nice special interests there. Do we have anybody like developer, builders, stuff like that who are hitting just the regular market for average Joes as well too? Maybe not necessarily renting, maybe it's more home ownership and what's happening in that realm.
yeah, that's feedback that Ryan and I are looking
Okay.
for to schedule like the last set of
Okay.
speakers, so I like it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I would
Yeah.
like that. I've
I
talked
think
to
it would round it out really nicely if we're looking at all aspects of it to just kind of, because I mean, I haven't bought a house in a while, so I guess
Don't want to.
I don't know what the real estate market's really like out there as far as trying to find stuff other than what you hear.
I just saw a great thread on Facebook about someone asking about who's a great mortgage lender, because I've been thinking about who would be, like, and I've only worked with 2 or 3 mortgage, so like, and I know there's many in the community, but like, who's someone that's maybe actively really interested in this community and
Yeah.
that.
And I go, maybe it's because of the realm of the world I'm in. We deal with a lot of rentals and that kind of stuff too, but I don't want to shortchange home ownership as far as we're looking at this whole thing as well too.
Right.
so.
Well, and council has been very focused on single-family home as well. I mean, we've done the rental market, and, you know, we're really looking at that urban infill of single-family as well. And the challenges of that, because I've talked to builders, and it's $180 to $200 a square foot, and how do you, you know, some of those challenges, and I'm not sure how I would love to have that conversation and strategy discussion on how we manage that so that, you know, entry-level home isn't beyond, you know, working-class family.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So I know CAP Services will be presenting, and CAP works with the city very closely on first home owner down payment assistance and some of our block grant funding, rehabbing. And so we do have, but I think just we're going to try to, you know, the whole purpose of the presentation is just to really find a well-rounded approach to the policy recommendations. But, you know, staff we have to start putting stuff down on paper just because we've had, you know, 4 or 5 meetings now, and we're getting some really good information. I just don't want those who presented early to be forgotten about in the end policy document.
I can see that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Could I request that once you get the goals from everyone, that we get the raw? They can be scrubbed for names, so they're anonymous, but I think it would be interesting to see everybody's goals as articulated.
You can keep my name on there.
Yeah.
I'll own my
No,
stuff.
you're right, questioning
I find
for
that
Travis.
so surprising. Kind of a meek, mild sort of guy.
Hey, go ahead.
Are there current housing goals that would be worthwhile to share with everybody as examples? The example you provided was great, but more examples for everybody to put together a set of goals. Is that something that can be shared?
Yep, so we do have, within our city's comprehensive plan and some of our existing housing documents, we do have goals, and I'm more than happy to send that information out.
Any other comments, questions? Great. Thanks. Thanks everyone for bringing in.
Awesome. Thank
bringing
you
in
guys.
the student
Great
group
discussion.
together. See you next month.
A video of this meeting is available for viewing on the city's website, stevenspoint.com/videos.